Our guest today is Angie Freese, who is the founder of the Meant for More Collaborative, an organizational network committed to rejuvenating school systems by igniting creativity, inspiring hope, and investing in the power of human connection. As a former classroom teacher, school administrator, and district level leader, Angie now spends her time working alongside educators across all levels of the organization, from classroom to boardroom, as a facilitator, coach, practitioner, and mentor. She empowers educators' efforts to interrupt antiquated and ineffective practices that only work for some by revitalizing collaborative teams with the competencies, skills, and tools required for sustainable growth and performance for all. Time for the episode. Let's dive in.
I'm educational justice coach Lindsay Lyons, and here on the Time for Teachership podcast, we learn how to inspire educational innovation for racial and gender justice, design curricula grounded in student voice, and build capacity for shared leadership. I'm a former teacher leader turned instructional coach. I'm striving to live a life full of learning, running, baking, traveling, and parenting because we can be rockstar educators and be full human beings. If you're a principal, assistant superintendent, curriculum director, instructional coach, or teacher who enjoys nerding out about co-created curriculum with students, I made this show for you. Here we go. Angie Freese, welcome to the Time for Teachership podcast.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
I'm so excited you're here. You have written a phenomenal book, and I'm excited to dive in. But before we do, what do you think is important for listeners to know about you, keep in mind as we jump into our conversation today?
Sure. Well, first and foremost, I've been blessed with the opportunity to be a mom. I have a 14-year-old daughter who is amazingly about to be a high schooler. She humbles me every day, and I am so proud of her. I also think it's important for folks to know that I'm an educator that comes from a family of educators. And now I have this gift of traveling all over the country and working elbow to elbow with teachers and their administrators to really refresh their pursuit of excellence through equitable, inclusive practices that are grounded in hope and optimism and strength. And so my joy really comes from helping people deepen their understanding of strengths that they already have within their system, and also the strengths of the people that comprise that system. And so we can begin to really authentically talk about what's already working and apply those patterns of thinking and behavior to really resolve any challenges that we might be facing. So the ideas and the thinking and the momentum and the possibility that I can offer teachers and that we'll talk about today really comes from this urgency to create systems that are by design able to serve each and every learner who walks into our school communities, because I don't believe that's something that should be left to chance.
That is so good. And I was reminded as you were talking about strengths and the focus on strengths that somewhere in your book, and you can correct me because I'm probably going to paraphrase incorrectly, with this idea of the research being that students who identify schools as places that actually identify and help support their strengths, they're like far more motivated, doing well in school, all the things. And that's often, sadly, like not what we're seeing. We're not seeing this like excitement about strengths. We're seeing, here's what's wrong, fix it, do better. Just that.
Right. Absolutely. And when we continue to ask questions about what's wrong versus what's right, we're not going to be able to reveal the answers that are truly needed to foster the conditions for success and the learning spaces that are necessary to do this work moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh my gosh. Okay. So much of your work is so grounded in equity. It is brilliant. I love it. I love just even like the intro. It's so well framed, so well thought out, so well anchored in this sense of justice that I truly appreciate. And so I think that this question is very fitting for you. When Dr. Bettina Love talks about freedom dreaming, she says, their dreams grounded in the critique of injustice. And I love that as kind of a backing to the question, what is that big dream for you in terms of education broadly, a specific sense of it, however you want to tackle that question?
Sure. Well, in its simplest terms, I'm on this journey to reclaim the dignity of our profession and elevate the people within while doing so. I think the nuances and complexities of that are indeed real, but my approach is unique because I intentionally choose to discover what is inherently good about a person, a team, or a system within which I'm working, and then ensure others know how to channel those patterns of thinking and behaviors that got us those good results. so that then we can apply that new learning to new situations or challenges that we might be facing. Um, it reminds me, Einstein was right. It's certainly true that we won't solve our problems if we're only accessing the same thinking that created those problems in the first place. And as such, you ask me what I dream about. I dream about designing sustainable learning spaces where people truly notice what's working, can determine why it's working, and then consider whether or not those same principles can be applied to our current issue. I mean, could you just imagine teams and schools and districts that honor and dignify the people within, lifting people up, appreciating each other and what they have to offer? Um, I think about creating these spaces of inclusion and authenticity so that connections and partnerships can truly be made in service to our desire that ensures, no learner's address determines the quality of the education that they receive. I mean, can't you just imagine working on a team where the adults saw hope and optimism and possibility and their opportunity to change the trajectory of a student's life for the better? I mean, like, I want to work there.
Right. I think that's it too, right? I think a lot of educators want to work there and then like often find ourselves in this space that we've created of like focusing on the wrong things, maybe for the right reasons at one point, but we got to get to that space that everyone ultimately wants to be, which is the place you're describing. I totally can imagine that.
Yeah. And, I don't pretend to have all the exact answers for how each individual or team could approach this work, but I do know how to get these kinds of conversations started and how to guide people towards truly customized approaches for servicing the kids and families that they're blessed to serve. Um, and so you ask what the big dream is. Well, it's still about this idea of working in hundreds of schools and districts, elbow to elbow with thousands of teachers, all across the country. I've been witness to the true brilliance of teachers in classrooms and schools. And yet it's those same teachers that are paralyzed by these barriers and restraints of various policies or procedures that have by design created these inequities that we're talking about. And these inequities, they create infrastructures that prevent teachers and leaders from being able to design and demonstrate, what they're truly capable of. And so with that restraint, right, we then have to be willing to say, okay, so now we've created by our own doing systemic inequities that then are far more difficult to dismantle because, when we have generation of kids who haven't yet been seen or heard or valued for who they are, or even had a chance to unlock their own greatness, this is clearly a blocker that needs to be addressed. And I must say, these inequities exist and that need to be addressed for the adults too.
Mhm. Yeah, actually what you were just talking about in terms of getting the conversation started, like you can help them there. That to me, I think addresses the parallel between what we want students to be able to do. We want them to have generative conversations and all this stuff, right? Lean into the challenge and tackle the hard things and be empathetic and all the things. And I guess I'll ask you to speak to that in a moment. But I also think we as adults really struggle. I think about the realm of politics in the United States, particularly, and political discourse, and how that is so challenging for us. It's challenging to push back against those systems that you're talking about, have been really by design made it impossible or incredibly challenging for large numbers of students to succeed and teachers to succeed. And so how do we, in terms of our mindsets, really even approach kind of this shift toward more generative discussion, overall well-being, dismantling the system, kind of all the things, all the pieces that you talk about in your book? What's that big initial mindset shift that you might recommend people thinking
Yeah.
about?
Well, as you're talking, it makes me think one of the greatest risks facing education today is this pervasive manner in which we simply just devalue the adults that are facilitating learning experiences in our classroom. I mean, Lindsay, let's just get right to it. And I don't know why we're enabling this narrative to continue because this critical, this redundant narrative can honestly be hard to ignore. And in truth, there are indeed some adults in our schools and classrooms who are doing harm, and we need to be emboldened to take action when we see those things happening, of course. But I have seen some, and I've been in positions where I have played a role in coaching people out of the system. But this cohort of the unwilling or disinterested is truly very small. And their actions, I don't believe, can be used to make this sweeping generalization about the competency and quality and expertise of the 98% of people who are truly just fierce and brave and bold and absolutely dedicated to the mission of inclusive and equitable education. So the biggest problem I have with this larger narrative is that it's impacting two things. First, it's diminishing the levels of self-efficacy and self-worth of current teachers and teacher teams who truly are in this relentless pursuit of what's good and right and true in our schools. But number two, it's also thwarting our efforts to recruit candidates into the profession in the first place. And I think this is truly one of the most glaring and startling risks that we face. And so perhaps the first mindset shift to really address is that, no one person can carry the emotional or organizational weight of this transformation that's required. I mean, the exhaustion we feel is rooted in this continued tolerance of status quo, right? And it just sort of continues this destructive manifestation, right, about these irresponsible mindsets for our teachers, and what they're capable of and what they deserve. I mean, we don't falter in conditions that are intentionally designed for our success. And so, that admission is why the book specifically was designed for the reader to first embrace, what are my unique gifts and talents? How can I cultivate these talents into strengths? And then how can I empower my team to start learning and growing so that our kids can start learning and growing? And finally, the entire infrastructure itself, right, can become this system that by design best nurtures and develops the community it serves. So I think that's the first of perhaps two or three mindsets that we need to address.
Awesome. And I think you were kind of talking about the book structure, and I think there's so much in here in terms of like kind of those actions that we can take to kind of follow up that mindset shift. And I'm thinking about too that parallel that you're kind of thinking about. The first is really thinking about the teachers, right, and our own things as educators. And then ultimately, I think, right, that it's kind of a parallel process for students and coaching, and kind of, I often felt like I was living out my mistakes and my just like humanness, right, alongside my students. And it makes it, I think, much more relatable, real, authentic, whatever the word is, when we are doing that, when we're trying to live out what we're trying to, teach and work with students on. And I think ultimately you list a lot of things on page 6 of your book in terms of the attributes that we can take note of. I think you were talking about for students in that particular section, but I also think, as a human, regardless of how old you are, these all resonate with me in terms of what I want my colleagues to have in terms of attributes as well as my students. Do you mind kind of speaking to a few of those for us?
Sure, absolutely. Well, and actually that really connects to what I believe is the second mindset shift, is that we have the power to change that narrative that may be out there erroneously, and continuing to sort of permeate through our profession. I think that when we create these spaces for teachers to learn more about areas that will directly help the specific students that we serve, we're honoring the unique needs of both the student and the teacher and demonstrating our belief in the ability of the adult, right, to learn and apply that learning and create this necessary space in their classroom so that that learning can have a meaningful impact. So I think, again, trying to get out of or break through this infrastructure that truly isn't designed for the collaborative creativity and innovation required. So we start simple, right? We start with some of these ideas, like, for example, listening to one another. To what degree, you talked about questions earlier, we kind of danced around that topic a little bit. This idea of what questions are we asking so that we can seek to understand. Sometimes we're in systems where we're not asking questions because either we're not sure that we can do something about the responses that we get, or we're hesitant to ask because we don't think we have the skill set to respond to the question that we're asking. And this is a true detriment to our teachers in the system, because teachers working together can solve any problem or any issue or any challenge that they're thrown with. We just need to nurture and normalize this idea of collaborative inquiry, right? And truly, really engaging in opportunities to talk with one another, to meaningfully contribute to conversation, to recognize that every teacher, right, has something of value and worth to contribute to the conversation. And the more that our systems continue to make decisions that impact the people who are in the classroom, and the more those decisions are made in the absence of that perspective at the table, the more we're going to keep finding ourselves in this space. And so some of those pieces that I invite into the conversation really are, engaging in dialogue, anticipating and recognizing other people's feelings. But I think most importantly, and even perhaps the third mindset shift, is this idea that we have to truly believe in the value, not the potential, right? But the value and the worth of each individual within our learning communities, because we just have to be brave enough to rehumanize our profession in this way, right? We're spending way too much of our time and energy reacting to this faulty system rather than investing in rejuvenating people's passion, reestablishing the necessary space to truly honor the intention and the purpose of what school can mean for both adults and students.
Hi, this is Leah popping in to share this episode's freebie, which is a page of free resources from the Solution Tree website. You can find it at the blog post for this episode, www.lindsaybethlyons.com/191. Now back to the show.
Oh my gosh, there's so much there. Thank you for that.
I had to pause and take a breath for a second
Yeah.
because let's have some dialogue about this, right? These brave actions that are required.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I truly love so much of what you said. I love the rehumanization idea. I love the believing in your values and not the potential. Wow, that's good. That's really good. That's sitting with me. And I'm also thinking about, okay, so I'm in a meeting, for example, right? And something comes up, someone says something, and I want to be empathetic and I want to kind of engage in collaborative inquiry and I want to kind of do all of these things, and it's hard. And kind of where do I start? I think I'll leave that question open to you and say that I love some of the practical strategies. I particularly loved you have a sentence stems for curiosity. I think on
Yes.
page 137, that was really good. That was like, oh, I see. I literally can envision how this would play out right now. So feel free to take that in whatever direction you want.
Yeah, no, absolutely. First of all, thank you for finding some connection in these ideas. Much of what's in the book comes from my own authentic experience, whether I was a teacher or an administrator at the time, whether I was working in district office, and now, this great opportunity I have to work elbow to elbow with educators all across the country just reminds me that we are all human beings, right? Which means that we're just naturally prone to error, right? We're going to make mistakes. We're going to forget something important. We're going to say something we didn't mean. We're going to react in a way that we're not proud of. And, we're not going to win at all the things all the time. And so I think that's also why authenticity, this idea of embracing your authentic self, is bookended with giving yourself grace in my manuscript, because those two ideas resonate so strongly with me. I have to like who I am, and I have to be able to give myself the same grace that I so freely give to others, so that I can do the work on me first, right? I can't work on my team. I can't work on the system until I truly feel like I'm okay with what I can offer my team. I'm okay with who I am. I'm comfortable with the space in which I can show up and be my authentic self. Because I mean, honestly, we're just human. Like we have to be patient with ourselves. We're just trying to do the best we can with what we have and figure the rest out along the way. When we show ourselves this level of kindness, I think we can in turn show that to other people, which creates a different space for us to have dialogue about the hard things, right? And when we show this kind of gratitude for what we do have, that can lead us to learn more about that can lead us to learn more about what we might be able to do to make our learning spaces even stronger. And so, some of these ideas and preparing ourselves for these conversations um, can be really challenging, particularly when we're in spaces that don't feel safe and comfortable. For me to show up in the ways that I know I should, to be brave enough to ask the questions that need to be asked, to say some things that um, can oftentimes be interpreted personally, right? And so if we can really think about the system and how our intentions are being implemented and the resulting impact those intentions are having on the system, now we're getting somewhere because we're depersonalizing the conversation, and now we're just talking about, some people made those decisions at a time when that was all the information they had, right? And we have to trust that people made the best decisions with the information they had at the time. But now that we've learned more and we know better, we have this responsibility to re-examine what we're currently doing or what's currently working or not working within our system, in pursuit of this idea of excellence. So, I think that's important. We're not going to be able to have all the answers all the time, but how can we just be prepared to ignite this conversation? Because our students depend on us to be able to do so.
Yeah, I absolutely. And I'm also thinking, so I'm thinking about all of those pieces for teachers. And then I'm also thinking about the leader level supports, because you spoke to structures, right? And this idea of the systems we work in. And so what are kind of the things, I guess twofold. So if you are a teacher listening, and then think about maybe the idea of teachers coaching students or supporting students to do this work. But if you are a leader listening, I'm thinking maybe the principal or whoever at the admin level supporting teachers. What are those things that we can put into practice or kind of coach people on or introduce language to, or literally whatever falls under the category of supporting or coaching folks to do this?
Yeah, and I love your thoughtfulness about the language, and I would add to that just like the tone in which we pursue new ideas and asks. Because again, we have to trust that we're in a system that was designed by people with good intentions at one time with the information they knew, and right, we can demonstrate our responsibility to pursue something new when we see evidence that the current system isn't working, right? So how do we go about that, right? There is a protocol that I offer right away in chapter 1, just to kind of explore this evidence, the seeking of evidence to inspire action. And so a couple of key questions that we could examine is, really, let's just start with it because we always get here anyway, right? We try to start with strengths and we end up defaulting to the concern. We're just natural fixers, right, as educators. So let's just start with the question. What key concern are we trying to resolve? Right? Like, what's the major impetus for our conversation or for this action? And then the next question absolutely has to be, where are we currently finding success? And how do we know? So, what's the evidence that ties to the things that we're being successful at right now? And it's in that pursuit, right, that we start to build this true foundation of what's already good and what's working. And here's the evidence that supports that. Because now, as we pursue the next questions, right, which are, where do we currently struggle and what's our evidence of that? We have this floor to stand on, right? We have this foundation in place. because when we notice our strengths, we can nurture those forward as we pursue answers to the things that maybe are most challenging to us. Um, and so that can lead us to another opportunity to start looking at, what are the mental models that are desired? What are the systems and structures that we desire? And then most importantly, I think, are what are the adult actions that are truly required for us to begin this new path forward? Because it's beyond the performative action of naming the belief and the words in our mission statement and our core values and all the things. Because if we're not behaving in a way that allows those ideas and those good words to lift themselves off the page and into action, then we can find ourselves in this tension, right? This dissonance for why maybe we're not getting the results that we desire.
That makes so much sense. And I imagine this work is highly challenging for some folks, particularly if we're operating in this system or kind of almost sometimes a school culture, even of not questioning, not engaging in collaborative inquiry. Maybe the ideal is there, but it's just not in practice yet. I'm wondering what the biggest challenge that you've seen teams face, that you've even faced as a coach to folks trying to do this work is, and maybe like how they have worked through it or how you would coach someone to work through that.
Yeah, absolutely. Because to be honest, Lindsay, the biggest challenge is not the belief that it can be done, right? That's not our biggest challenge. Like, we know what we're capable of. We do. And even though there's so much noise around us that's trying to pull us down or tell us that it can't work, we know that this work can be done. The biggest challenge is this shared commitment to implement the things that we've said we would do, right? To implement the behaviors and use the tone and language that truly honor the spaces that we desire. And let's be fair, I mean, it's tough, right? There will be barriers, there will be obstacles, but there also will be truth and there will be compassion and there will be hope and there will be purpose and there will be joy that comes from that. And I think it's those attributes that make it worth the risk, right? So how do we get started, right? Again, for me, when I'm working with whether it's an individual or a team or an entire district leadership team, right? No matter what our role is in the organization, the most important things are to start with self and to start with strength. So first I have to honor, what do I already know about myself? What do I already know about the situation? And then what's the urgency around these ideas, right? So that we can start to present some information that might help other people believe that this pursuit of whatever it might be, right? Whatever the change is worth the effort. That the joy and the hope and the sense of purpose, this meaningful, right, task, this purpose-driven joy that we find from our work is worth it. And when I do that, and then I talk to somebody else about it, and they start to see hope and possibility in the work, now it's not just me anymore. Now we're building a cohort. We're building this construct where I'm able to be more confident because I've got people around me who can see the truth in the same way that I do. And so as we think about that, right, then it leads us to starting with strength. So here's what we already do have that will help us, right, move forward in this way. And then the strengths are inevitably going to lead to things that we need to interrupt. But again, when we first start with self and we first start with strength, that's important. And the entire infrastructure of the manuscript, every chapter is written in this predictable cadence of, here's a non-example of, this attribute, right? Which in Meant for More classrooms, I identify 6 specific attributes, embracing your authentic self, fostering connections with others, cultivating your own curiosity. It's hard for kids to be curious if we're not curious too. Empowering your own voice, nurturing your own resilience, and then the final and 6th piece is giving yourself grace. But every chapter is written with this predictable cadence that starts with a non-example, gives a little background about how we're defining that attribute in the Meant for More classroom. And then boom, let's examine ourselves first so that we can talk with our team, so that we can talk with our students, so that then we can develop this infrastructure that allows for a sustainable structure to become in place.
Oh, I love that. And I think about the idea of that shared commitment actually fitting really nicely with some of the other episodes coming out around leading change. And so I think this will be like a really nice, I just think about like Mesereau talking about disorienting dilemma and you talking about how, right, you have to like have people have this introduce this information where it's like, oh, I want this, but this is how we're currently practicing, which I think also lends itself to that curiosity and collaborative inquiry. Yes, I just love all of these pieces coming together.
Yeah, well, I'm excited that you're excited, and it's making me it's making me excited. I think that some of these ideas, in truth, are really simple to understand, but they're far more complex to implement. And so my ask all throughout the book, but also most importantly when I'm coaching folks is, you know, what's the first next step that we want to take? You know, where am I already winning? And how can I just make sure that I'm doing more of that? Right. Because when we really stop and reflect on things that we do well, sometimes we don't know why, why that's working for us or how to replicate that in other areas. So for, you know, I might first say, gosh, this is something that I'm really comfortable with. It's working for my students, it's working for my team. And I'm just going to make sure that for the next 3 days, for the next week, for the next month, that I'm focused on doing more of that in my practice. And as I build those muscles of confidence, right, and I build those competencies within myself, it's empowering me to then be able to take whatever next steps I might need to address some things that aren't going as well, because I already know that I'm good at this stuff and I've got something of value and worth to contribute to my students and my team and the school as a whole.
Amazing. I think your last couple of answers actually have answered our call to action question, unless there was something else you wanted to add there. So many good things they can do once they end the episode.
Yes, yes. Well, can I also say, like, hey,
Yeah.
go buy the book, you know?
Yeah, for sure. For
Oh,
sure.
you know, here's in all seriousness, though, I mean, and people who truly know me as a human being would know that was actually quite uncomfortable for me to say out loud. But in all seriousness, I will say start with yourself. You know, I'll send you a tool that I like to use with individuals and teams that I'm coaching to help people identify their strengths and also the things they need to be at their best. And so you can load it up on the website or attach it with the podcast, and we'll just share a tool for people to be able to access. I mean, I think as a first step, truly a first call to action is to identify and acknowledge and embrace who you are and the value that you bring to this work. And it's this exercise that presents this little glimpse into believing that you are indeed meant for more, and you're learning how to take inspired action from that belief.
Amazing. The final two questions just to close this out, because this has been a very, very big conversation. I love that you ended with the idea of like, here's what we do, here's what you can do. We will definitely, to your point, link that resource in the show notes, the blog post for this episode. So folks grab it there. But I'm just curious, this is for fun for me. I just love to know what people are learning about. This does not have to be related to your work, but it totally can be if you want. What's something you've been learning about lately?
Well, I am notorious for reading about 17 books at a time. And in fact, in my slides and my communication with new clients, I'm like, well, here's what I'm learning about, right? And half of the things are not related to education, you know, whatever it is. But I think from a practitioner standpoint, I'm loving this deeper exploration of universal design for learning, because I'm really thinking about these inclusive, authentic, and relevant, you know, learning spaces, but how to naturally lift some of those attributes in as I'm designing learning spaces for adults. And I'm really excited to use some of the coaching and workshopping to model these ideas and make them approachable and accessible for any teacher to be able to lift and use in their own classrooms. So that's probably what's got me most excited right now.
I am on the same wavelength as you. I've been also just realizing, I can totally level up PD and learning for adults because like we can talk about these cool things with students. Way more fun to experience them. Yes, I agree. And then finally, people are going to want to get your book, learn more about you, connect with you, follow you wherever you are. What is the best way, do you think, to get in touch or learn more?
Yeah, so at the time of us recording today, I'm in the middle of this beautiful rebrand and relaunch as I'm creating this collaborative experience. And so some of the things are new, but for the most part, right, anybody could find me on LinkedIn at Angela Freese. But I also have a Meant for More collaborative Instagram account where I start running ideas and conversations with teachers up there for people to look at. And that's the handle for that is Meant for Momentum, and just a play on the title of the book.
Amazing. And if there are things that are updated, we can always add those later to the blog post version.
Oh, great. So, perfect.
Awesome. Oh, Angie, thank you. This was such a pleasure. And folks, go get that book. It was so good. Angie, thanks for being here today.
Thanks so much, Lindsay.
If you like this episode, I bet you'll be just as jazzed as I am about my coaching program for increasing student-led discussions in your school. Shane Safir and Jamila Dugan talk about a pedagogy of student voice in their book, Street Data. They say students should be talking for 75% of class time. Do students in your school talk for 75% of each class period? I would love for you to walk into any classroom in your community and see this in action. If you're smiling to yourself as you listen right now, grab 20 minutes on my calendar to brainstorm how I can help you make this big dream a reality. I'll help you build a comprehensive plan from full-day trainings and discussion protocols like Circle and Socratic Seminar to follow-up classroom visits where I can plan, witness, and debrief discussion-based lessons with your teachers. Sign up for a nerdy, no strings attached brainstorm call at lindsaybethlyons.com/contact. Until next time, leaders, think big, act brave, and be your best self.
This podcast is a proud member of the Teach Better Podcast Network. Better today, better tomorrow, and the podcast to get you there. Explore more podcasts at teachbetter.com/podcasts, and we'll see you at the next episode.